My name is Susan Reid, and we're here in the King Arthur Flour Test Kitchens. And today I'm going to make this beautiful chocolate and almond filled coffee cake. It's really pretty, and it has a lot of parts to it, but don't be afraid because we're just going to take the things one by one. Every little piece of it is easy to do. You just have to work your way through the recipe, but the results are totally going to be worth it. So the first thing I'm going to do is have my bread machine here give me a hand with the dough. It's a yeast dough, and it's pretty simple to mix. So to start, in the bucket of the bread machine goes half a cup of water, quarter cup of sugar, 1 whole egg, 1 egg yolk. We've saved the white. You'll see where that ends up later. That's going to be in one of the fillings, so that's set aside. 3 tablespoons of butter. This is soft. It's room temperature, so the bread machine won't have any trouble mixing that into the dough. Whole wheat pastry flour. This is just to give us a little extra nutrition. It's a soft ground whole wheat flour. It's always kind of nice to sneak some whole grains into people when they're not looking. They'll never know. A little bit of salt. Some all-purpose flour, which is going to help everything stay together. And I'm using instant yeast. Instant yeast is different from active dry yeast. It is smaller pieces, and you don't need to dissolve it in water first. If you don't have a bread machine, you can totally do this recipe in your mixer. Just put the water in the mixing bowl of the mixer, add the active dry or instant yeast, let it sit for a minute, and then just add everything else the same way. And then you can mix it up just like you would with your regular mixer. This is dry milk, which will make the dough more tender and help to caramelize it a little bit. But you don't want to add the dry milk right to the water, or else it's going to make a lump. So I'm going to add the dry milk on top of the flour. And I'm going to just tuck this right into the machine. I'm going to hit start, and it's going to start mixing. And it's very important with a bread machine to come back and visit. It's convenient because it's going to take care of itself for the most part, but you want to come back in about 2 or 3 minutes and just make sure that there's no flour stuck in the corners. So your little spatula comes in handy. You want to get in there and make sure that all the wet and the dry is getting evenly mixed. Even right now, you can see, if you come in here, that some flour is getting stuck around the edges. So I'm just going to very quickly scrape that. Okay, since this is a chocolate and almond coffee cake, we got to make streusel for the top, and we're going to make 2 other fillings. So the streusel is going to be next. We're going to start with a half a cup of flour, and a quarter cup of brown sugar is going to go right in there. If you have the Play-Doh factor, you like to get your hands dirty, which I really do. I like to just get in there and get these 2 combined a little bit. I have a fork for when it gets messy. So this just helps me break up some of the lumps in the brown sugar. Although a little bit of brown sugar melting on top of your coffee cake is not a bad thing. So this is broken up a little bit. I'm going to add a teaspoon of cinnamon. Use the fork, stir that all up. And then some butter to bring everything together. This is soft, so that's going to make things a little bit easier. And the fork will just help mix everything together. This is a pastry fork with big fat tines, so it moves things along a little bit more quickly than if you just took a fork out of the drawer. And then, since it's a chocolate and almond coffee cake, both of those are represented in the streusel. So I have some chocolate chips and some almonds. I'm just going to mix all that together. So this is going to be ready to go once we have the dough filled and shaped and in the pan. This is what's going to be sprinkled on the top. Now the next filling I'm going to make is an almond filling, and that starts over here with some almond paste. And I'm going to make this in the mixer. I have 6 ounces of almond paste right here. You can buy this in cans. And I'm going to put it on the mixer with some sugar. And I'm just going to run the mixer just a little bit to let the sugar help break up the almond paste into smaller pieces. And after that, the lost egg white, I'm sure you remember that from the dough, it's right here. So that's going to go in and make a nice spreadable filling with the almond paste. So now that that's broken up a little bit, the egg white goes in, So this is smooth. I can spread this. So that's going to be one of the fillings that we're going to use for the coffee cake. Now we're going to make the chocolate filling, which is really very simple. Some sugar and cinnamon, some unsweetened natural cocoa powder, and some chocolate chips. And we're going to put some simmering heavy cream over that. I put it in the microwave with this wonderful little hat because heavy cream will climb right up and make a big mess in your microwave. So always make sure you put a cover on it and make sure that steam can get out. Otherwise, you'll make a big mess. Now I'm just going to pour the heavy cream right on top of here. Let it sit for a second so that the heat can get to the chocolate chips. And once I stir this until it's smooth, the filling is done. Now we're going to assemble the coffee cake, which is probably the most complicated part, but again, just take it step by step. It's not that hard. I've taken the dough out of the bread machine and divided it in half. So this half is going to wait for later. And this half has already been rolled out almost to size. It needs to be about 10 inches wide and 12 to 15 inches long. Don't worry if it's not quite 15 inches long, because as you work with it, it's going to get longer anyway. So you don't have to worry too much about that. One of my favorite tricks for rolling anything is to take a food storage plastic bag, and I cut off the bottom and I cut up one side, and I just put this right on top of my dough. When I do that, I can roll right over it and my rolling pin doesn't get dirty. I can see exactly where I'm going and nothing sticks to anything. So if you've got like a sticky cookie dough or anything like that, this is a great hint. And as you can see, it just rolls out very nicely. You want it to be a rectangle. It doesn't have to have surgically straight sides. Once this is done, no one is ever going to be judging you on that part. Don't worry. So this part of the dough I'm going to spread with the chocolate filling that we just made. And once you put the chocolate filling on here, you want to cover the dough, but you want to leave one edge uncovered because that part is going to stick to the rest of the dough. So if it has chocolate filling, that won't work. And just put your filling on top here. I'm going to use an offset spatula, which is one of the neater little tools that pastry chefs use, just to spread this out nice and evenly. Go all the way to the ends on the short sides. I'm just going to put a little bit of water on this edge. Now I'm going to roll it up. Very simply. You don't want to pull or stretch on dough when you roll it into a spiral like this. If you do that, it tends to go out of shape as it bakes. You're just going to let the dough land where it does, and this wet part is going to help it stick to itself. This is the part in instructions where people say, pinch the seam closed. So we're just going to pinch it all the way around, all the way down. And that's the first one. So this is the second half of the dough. I'm going to use my little plastic bag here once again. Now, when you're working with dough like this and it starts to snap back, don't escalate tensions. You want to just stop and let the dough rest for a little bit, and once it relaxes, it'll be much easier to work with. So say if you get it this far and you need to go put a load of laundry in, fine, go do that, come back. When you come back, the dough will be much better behaved. Give it a little time out. You can also, since this dough is pretty easy to handle, I'm just going to sprinkle it a little bit. I'm going to let gravity do some of the work. Just going to hold it up and let it stretch just a little bit. And the same on this end. Now, one hint about this, when you're trying to figure out what dimension to make your rectangle, most rolling pins, if you're looking for something that's 10 inches wide, from here to here on most rolling pins happens to be 10 inches. So if something says roll it 10 inches wide by whatever, you can get it roughly out to the width of your barrel. And then you're where you need to go. The reason you want it wide this way is the more width you have, the more spirals you get, and the cooler it looks later on. So this is going to get the almond filling spread. Now the almond filling is a little bit sticky, so if it's warm, it's a little easier to work with. You don't want it hot because you don't want to cook the dough, but it should be at room temperature. So if you're doing some of these parts of the recipe in advance, make sure that your fillings are at room temperature before you start to work with them. And once again, I'm going to leave this strip in the front uncovered, but I am going to put the filling all the way out to the ends. And this is what I meant before when I said it will get longer just from working with it. So don't worry if it wasn't 15 inches at the very beginning of the operation. Okay, just like we did with the chocolate, this is going to get rolled up. And before I seal it, I'm going to wet the edge. And pinch it all together. And after this, the real fun starts. We're going to assemble these two into one big coffee cake. We're going to bake this in a 10-inch springform pan. I don't know if you've ever used a springform before, but it has this really nice little hinge so that you can put dough into it, and after it's baked, instead of trying to get dough out of it, you can just take the edges off. It's really a nice little pan to use, good for cheesecakes. I'm going to just spray it with a little nonstick spray. This is another hint. A lot of people will try to spray things like this. Everything is portable. If the can is upright, it will work better. So you can move the pan to the spray. I'm going to just keep that there while I work with these two pieces of dough. Now I have my seam. I'm going to put the seam facing me. Pat that a little bit. Now I'm going to cut both of these in half lengthwise and watch what happens. This is kind of the fun part. I've got a pizza wheel, which is very handy for doing this. Right up the middle. And then I'm just going to tilt this so you can see the cut edge. And this is going to make a really pretty pattern once it's baked. So you can see the nice layers of filling and dough right there. Now I'm going to take one of each of these and pinch them together at the top. And I'm just going to lay one on top of the other. It's, if you want to be fancy about it, it's a two-stranded braid, but all we're doing is putting them together so these colors will alternate. And then I'm going to continue with the other half of the dough. I'm going to overlap these a little bit this way. Help them stick together with a little bit of water. I don't want to smush them too hard or else there's going to be filling everywhere and that'll be a big mess. So, this is the seam, which is the most complicated part. Now, we're getting a little bit longer than my table is, so what I'm going to do is start putting this into the pan so it has a place to go. Very carefully, cut side up around the edges of the pan. And now I can finish. Okay. So this is going to rise for 30 to 35 minutes. It's going to get big and puffy looking. But before we do that, we're going to add the streusel. Now we're going to put the streusel on top. You can let this rise for a little while before you do that, and that will give you a little more surface area. So it's not critical specifically when you do it, as long as you don't forget to do it before the coffee cake goes in the oven. So I'm just going to sprinkle this all over the top, all the way around the edges. And as this bakes, it's going to get bigger and it's going to fill in the center of this. You might still have a little bit of a hole in the center, but if it fills itself all in, that's fine too. And this way you'll get some of these nice chocolate chips and nuts in the middle of it, as well as on the top. In this case, too much is just enough. Now we want to cover this while it rises so that the dough doesn't dry out. And one of our handy weapons for that is a shower cap that we use for food. It beats wrestling with plastic wrap, and it will take care of this the entire time that it's rising. So I'm going to set a timer for 30 minutes, and that will tell me when it's time to put the coffee cake in the oven. Now the coffee cake is done. It baked for 25 to 35 minutes, and you can bake it a little bit once you test it and you think it's done. So you put a skewer inside, and if it comes out clean, that's pretty much done. But I wanted to leave this in just a little bit longer because I wanted my almonds to be a little bit toasty. That's not going to hurt it. You just pop it open. There it goes. So you can take this right off and transfer it to a cake plate, and it'll be ready for your party. You don't really want to cut on this surface. Let's take a peek at what it looks like inside. Swirls of chocolate and almond with a little bit of cinnamon, crunchy nuts, nuggets of chocolate. What's not to like?